Shout out to our man, Mark Haynes, over at the Sacramento Observer, had an interview with Dwight Howard where
how did that happen?
I don't.
Why did Dwight want to talk to not Mark Haynes or the Observer, but just like, did he call Sacramento or was there a lead? Like, hey, you probably called.
No, maybe
Dwight
Mark
Howard.
did it. Maybe Mark called Taiwan. I don't know.
I'm just asking because Dwight Howard wasn't on my mind.
Well, that's a good point.
So I don't know.
That's a good point.
I guess Mark was just sitting around like,
I wonder what Dwight's doing.
Right.
I have Mark's number.
I'll
I'll text Mark and ask him.
Maybe
Like, hey,
what's up, man?
I've tried to get Mark on the show before, but he's busy. I don't know.
Easy dude.
But hey,
But that's a hell
did
of a
Dwight
scoop
call
he
you, or
got.
did you call Dwight?
That's a hell of a scoop in the story you got, though. Big ups to him. Big ups to the Observer. Shout out to Larry Lee. That's my guy over there too.
Indeed.
Tone.
Antonio Harvey.
Harvey, man.
Yes, indeed.
There we go, man. Russell, my man Russell over there, the whole crew.
Dwight Howard says, I'm not retired from the NBA just yet. I would love to help the Sacramento Kings contend for a title, even though I believe their team is pretty much set. Well, Mr. Dwight Howard, what you may not be aware of is one of the biggest flaws in this team last year was, in fact, the backup center position. And two local radio show hosts, D'Lo and KC to be exact, we're asking the question, if it's that big of an issue, why couldn't Dwight Howard do it? Dwight Howard can't play. You telling me Dwight Howard can't play in the league anymore? I find that hard to believe.
I agree.
Especially with what we, not necessarily Monty or Mike Brown, were asking him to do, but what D'Lo and Casey were asking him to do. Why in the world couldn't he do that for the Sacramento Kings? And now that this story is out there where Dwight tells the Sacramento Observer, I'd love to help the Sacramento Kings contend for a title. Like, yeah, why not?
Yeah.
The role is, you don't need to be, this was the argument all last season when we were talking about this, especially post-trade deadline. You don't have to be the Hall of Famer.
Right.
You don't have to be the 4-time defensive player of the year. You need to rebound, work, be physical, particularly when Sabonis is out of the game, and then sit down. Yeah. That's it. It's said the same thing about Boogie too. It's just hard for me to believe that neither one of those guys can fill that role.
So Stephen Brown, he says one of the reasons is because Dwight Howard is washed. And he's looked that way for several
I love
seasons.
Stephen Brown, man, but he really says dumb stuff sometimes.
No, it's just ridiculous. One of the reasons, I'm not saying it's the main reason, one of the reasons they won that Mickey Mouse championship, the Lakers did.
That was unnecessary.
Well, they were in Disney. That's why I call it Mickey Mouse.
Well,
take it how you want. I'm just saying.
It was an NBA championship that had a connotation to
it. It's because of Dwight Howard and what he was able to provide off the bench, defensively, on the boards, his inside presence. That was 3 years ago now. You're not asking Dwight to lead you to a championship. You're asking him to give you 10 to 12 minutes a night, probably. He can do that. I believe he can do that.
Let me ask everyone, Steven, everyone, a question. And we were really high on the way Alex Len played in the final stretch of the season. Honestly, we're family. Let's be honest with each other. It's a trust circle. Do we think Alex Len is better than Dwight Howard right now?
I think better is the word. No,
don't measure Dwight with what he was. Don't measure him against that. I'm not asking you to measure Dwight in 2010 to 2023. I'm asking you to measure Dwight Howard in 2023 to Alex Len. I'll take it a step further and ask you to measure Dwight Howard versus Neemias Queta right now. And these are honest questions. I'm curious how everybody feels. Yeah. Who's better, Dwight or Alex Len? Dwight or Neemias Queta? It's an honest question.
I'll put it to you like this. I would sign Dwight right now without thinking twice, and he'd be the backup center behind Sabonis, ahead of Queta, ahead of Alex Len.
I think Queta can be better. I ultimately think Queta will be better. There are things that we saw when he was on the floor that still confuse me a little bit. That I feel like there's his inability to grab the rebound was just so fascinating. He would tip it and he'd always get his hands on it.
Right.
but it was like he couldn't grab it, and it was confusing.
That's tough.
That's not an issue with Dwight.
Nope.
And I think what happens, like Stephen Brown talking about Dwight Wash, well, like, okay, compared to what? The Dwight Howard we knew growing up? Sure.
Mm-hmm.
He's not that guy anymore. But as a serviceable NBA player now in a specific role, I refuse to believe, whether it's for Sacramento or the 29 other teams in the league. It's tough for me to believe that Dwight Howard can't play basketball anymore.
I agree.
I don't think he's going to do what he did in Taiwan. I also don't think he's a starting five unless it's an emergency situation. If you have a role for him as a backup in limited minutes, somewhat limited minutes, where maybe he only has to play sporadically large minutes, man, I absolutely think Dwight can do that. And I do feel the same about DeMarcus Cousins. But I feel like Dwight Howard can do that.
I agree.
Today.
I agree 100%, man. And this is kind of the same feeling that I had during the season when people were going crazy over backup center and Mason Plumlee and all this other stuff.
Our Lord and Savior.
It's like, bro, this is not where the Kings are going to make the playoffs or not make the playoffs, or succeed or not succeed. They didn't lose in the first round because of a lack of a backup center, right? They changed their backup center in game 6 and ended up having probably their best game in the playoffs. So when you look at it like that, I feel like you can only improve, like you can only get positive production from that spot. Why not go with a guy like Dwight Howard, who has shown what he's been in the past? And if you take 50% of that, once again, I think that's still better than where Alex Len is today and Amias Queta is right now. And if it doesn't work, I'm sure it'll be pretty cheap. You can move on.
Looking at the chat, people like Robbie Ford aren't listening, so we'll just ignore him and let him type into the abyss. But I'll bring up Stephen Brown's point. Stephen Brown says Whiteside, Dwight, and Tristan are all the same player in 2023. Stephen, I'll say that that's absolutely wrong. Yeah. Dwight is significantly better than Hassan Whiteside. But Tristan is interesting because Tristan had a role here in Sacramento, which he wasn't fitted for. Tristan had a role in Los Angeles that he was, and he played reasonably well for Los Angeles.
Dwight's better than Tristan right now.
I absolutely agree. And the role was important. Hassan is an adventure no matter what uniform he's wearing. Tristan here, I don't know, bro. Your guess. If we can get one honest answer from Monty McNair off the record, I'll ask him about Tristan Thompson. just walk me through the process here of how we landed Tristan Thompson in Sacramento.
It all went downhill when we found out they called him TT.
Oh, that was the end. They still like Tyrese still out there tweeting TT.
The way he said it too. He's like, yeah, we're just out there with TT.
And I think Shemezi sealed his fate by calling him a Sacramento Kings legend. It's like, oh,